break out inspection gear here. We'll bring it up here towards the house. So this is just an array of inspection equipment, you know, particle counter, air pump. You know, this would be what I would use if I was doing air testing. You know, it's air cassettes, tape lifts, you know, basically everything I need to. I got swabs in here too if I need to swab. And I got my thermal imaging camera. And then basically just, this is a scope, borescope here for doing like inside wall cavities. I'll break this out later too, and we're going to take a look at that air handler unit. And then basically all the other stuff I need to do this. So the first thing I'm going to do is start with air counts. So when I do this on all my inspections, you know, whether I'm out doing an initial inspection like this, or, you know, when I have jobs going on in the field, I'm constantly monitoring the air, I'm constantly monitoring my equipment. You know, one, I want to make sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. If I'm being hired to clean, I want to make sure that, you know, this is something that really supports that. And then also, you know, it's good to document pre-existing conditions. Like if I'm doing mold remediation and I have this data before I started, you know, I can go back to a homeowner and be like, if there's any questions on breaches of containment or any concerns like that, you know, I have, you know, tangible data to look at to show, well, actually, you know, it's not there, you know, there's been no cross-contamination. Your house is much cleaner than when we, you know, all those things. So.
And why do you start outdoors with the measurements?
Well, you know, to get a baseline, and you know, and that's really how most air sampling is looked at. You know, most air, you know, there's other methods, but pretty much, you know, how air quality is assessed is comparisons to what the outdoor air is. You know, because I do so much of this, I use it a little differently. I always take an outdoor air sample, but I have, you know, I've done it like probably several thousand times. So I have a very good baseline of what air is supposed to look like. Because the problem with outside air, it's all over the place, you know, depending on the time of year, depending on wind direction, depending on where you are geographically in a state. Whether or not it just rained, you know, all these factors. So using that for control to me is like a little wishy-washy. I still do it because I want to have that data, but I'm not really relying on an outdoor air sample to, you know, tell me whether or not indoor air samples are bad or good. So, and then I just basically take, you know, this thing, like everything else, I think this is like a $3,000 piece of equipment, and you can literally communicate with Mars with this thing. You know, I can shoot video. I can be like, you know, when I'm running testing, I can be saving it and uploading it to a file, you know, but you know me, like I'm surface level with tech. Like it does what I need it to do for me. It has so many features that I don't use. Primarily, you know, I'm just using it as an air quality meter, and I'm still taking photographs of, you know, my readings. So
you can kind of
yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, so that was the guy.
So has this been like shellacked or sealed with paint?
He decided that he thought that matched pretty well. Interesting
Okay.
that you could find it in about 3 seconds.
Well, I don't know if I'd call that matching well. But...
No, and I painted this. I had ceiling paint. This is where I first noticed it. It was all along there.
Okay.
And the really good guys that came out and checked way back when went through, and they, you know, they like pounded on the ceiling in the attic,
Uh-huh.
and everywhere that I told them that the spots were, and they
Okay.
saw them through here,
Okay.
that there were problems
Okay.
above.
Okay. So when you say problems,
Well, it was leaking.
leaking.
I mean, it
Okay.
was, the
Okay.
roof was leaking. I've been debating on getting the the air conditioning stuff cleaned out, but our AC guy said you have to be really careful of that with older air
Ducts.
ducts,
Yeah.
because if the person doesn't know what they're doing, they can
That's anything.
rip it
I'm gonna take a look at it.
Okay.
I'm gonna look at your ducts. I'm gonna look at the air handler unit.
Because this part of the house gets really
Yeah.
dusty, and you can
Yeah.
see around some
Yeah.
like these in particular
Yeah.
are really
Well,
bad.
I mean,
The other
so
part of
it's the
house is-
price you pay for living on a dirt road.
I know.
I'm just saying, living in the country,
I know.
having a lot of stuff in your house. I mean, because the reality is the harder we make our homes to clean, the more dust we have. Which, I mean, it just is what it is. So,
we just.
but I'm gonna look at
process.
the air, and I'll be able to tell you, not just if there's a mold problem, but if any other particulate in the air is worrisome. But
Okay.
I wouldn't be concerned. I'd already start feeling better if I were you. Okay.
I,
All right. So we're gonna run through the house, do what we're gonna do,
Okay.
and then I'll circle back around with you. And if I have any questions or whatever, but
Okay.
probably 20 minutes or so, we'll be in and
Okay.
out of here. Okay.
Okay.
We're gonna get started. All right.
Thank you.
Do you have
so
any other
much.
questions?
No, I'm good.
Good?
I'm good. You
Okay.
guys want anything to drink or anything?
No, I'm good.
Good.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Yeah, appreciate
Okay,
that.
Thank you.
All right.
So another thing I like to do before I get started is just take a quick walk around the outside of the house. I'm looking for potential signs of roof leaks, roof damage, whether or not house has gutters. A lot of times when I'm doing inspections, it's water intrusion issues, and there's always all these other factors besides some sort of plumbing leak that's causing water damage on our house. And you could see, like, to me, this right here would be like a high level of concern for me as far as water intrusion. No gutters. You got a valley right here, so the roof, when it rains here, water is going to be running down that slope right there, capturing into that. All the runoff here, running right here. You got these flower beds, which essentially act like sponges, so they're going to hold on to that moisture. And you can see that the grading of this property, so the natural water flow, even runoff from this piece of property everywhere, is going to be going towards this house. So,
Yep.
I would recommend in this situation that someone, that gutters would alleviate a lot of concern there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking just for stuff like that. A lot of times too, they're sprinkler systems, we'll have irrigation systems. I mean, you can see how wet this is through here, and we haven't had rain in a while. It just holds on to moisture.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, like our irrigation sprinklers will be, blowing directly on the house, stuff like that. Yeah, so I mean, everything looks nice and clean. Usually you can see right there, you can see what I'm talking about, the irrigation system.
Mm-hmm.
But, it looks like everything, the water is being, if it's on, is spraying this way. There's no water spray on the house. Usually when you're getting a lot of water, you're going to have, you're going to have signs of it. It's going to be covered in algae and mildew, and it's, it's going to look like it's being blasted by water all the time.
Do you also check around windowsills too whenever?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm just like looking around, I'm looking for like, staining, where water's maybe traveling or collecting. And I mean, everything looks pretty clean, so. you know, for me, this would be an area that I would be concerned about. You know, you can see where the water is just running down right there. It's going to sit right there. Having the rock is going to help a little bit. Okay. So that's our outdoor air sample, you know, and basically what I'm looking for is really anything over, you know, so what this thing is showing me is count based on micron size of the particulate. It's also giving me the relative humidity and a couple other things that I want to know. But I'm really looking for, you know, 1 micron and larger is where we're going to typically start finding mold species. Everything smaller is going to be pet dander, skin cells, you know, dust, you know. So I'm going to focus on everything, but that 1 micron and larger is usually where, you know, we start seeing mold spores. So, and now what I'm going to do is just basically walk through the house and just check everything. You know, it's going to take, you know, 5 minutes to run through the house and, you know, have some really good data as far as the air is concerned. It's something that I can, you know, offer people for free, you know, as just part of my normal inspections. You know, so I think it's nice to have this information. So the next thing I'm going to do is do a quick scan my thermal camera. And what this will do is give me the ability to just run through the house, you know, because if you're checking things with a moisture meter, you know, it's really impossible to check every surface. So what this does will, and the camera's not showing me moisture, but it's going to pick up any temperature fluctuations, you know, temperature anomalies is what they would call them. And you know, if things are wet, usually there's good visual indicators with this. And you know, that way I can go back and check those areas further with a moisture meter. So again, this is really not conclusive, doesn't really mean anything. It just kind of gives me, you know, a little superhuman, you know, vision, so to speak. You know, quick scan of the house, you know, overall scan, you know, see things maybe that the homeowner's not even seeing, you know, so. And the same thing with this piece of equipment. You can shoot video and upload it, but I'm pretty simple, so try to make all this technology work for me as easy as possible. So.
And what's it mean if there's a hot spot on there?
I mean, so like that is the light, right? And so what that's picking up is the heat signature coming out of the attic.
Gotcha.
So in a lot of that, you can see where it's blue. That doesn't mean moisture, right? So
how would you know the difference between moisture and not moisture?
That's really where it comes down to, you know, doing this a lot. You know, usually it'll be like, you know, if you see above that picture right there, like that dark hue, usually where there's moisture, you would have pooling of that, and that's not an indicator of moisture. It's just, you know, this thing goes through different fluctuations because what it's doing is just reading surface temperature.
Oh, wow.
So all that is really saying, like those hot spots right there in the ceiling could be, you know, where there's insulation that's maybe missing and the heat from the attic is transferring to, you know, that surface. Again, it's just a way to run through a large house and maybe pick up something that, you know, you can't see with your eye. You don't have the opportunity to check everything with a moisture meter.
That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the heat on, right?
No.
Yeah. So what that's telling me is there's some sort of transference between the unconditioned air in the attic and this vent. You know, that's what that's showing to me, that basically the inside of that duct is warmer than the surfaces around it. And obviously these surfaces are exposed to the AC and all those things, so they're going to stay cooler. Okay. All right, that's it for that. All right, so the next thing that we're gonna do is go through and check all those water stained areas with a moisture meter, be able to determine for sure if any of those materials still are elevated. So what I'm going to do right now, again, I'm going to go through, check the water stains, look for moisture. The other thing I'm going to do is just take a look at the temperature coming out of the AC. You know, people, like everything else, people really don't have a good understanding of their air conditioning units, the maintenance of it. They don't, you know, they think because the AC company comes out once a year and takes a look at it that they're in good shape, and the reality is they're really not. So, you know, again, my normal inspections, I always look at the AC. I'm going to look at the coil, going to look at the blower, I'm going to look at, you know, the drain line, just see if there's any issues. You know, I can already see that there's some growth around some registers in there, and very normal, especially in areas like bathrooms where there's going to be a lot of condensation. But I'm going to take a look, because a lot of times what will happen is the AC coil gets gunked up, and over time it'll stop removing moisture out of the air. So what happens is you go in a house, it's like 74 degrees in here, but it's like 70% humidity. It's like very uncomfortable, and you're like, why is this happening? And usually it's because your AC is just not performing well. So the coil gets gunked up. You know, the coil is going to be, it's an evaporation coil, so it actually removes the moisture out of the air. So what ends up happening is when that thing gets gunked up, it basically just pushes cool, moist air into your house. It's not really processing moisture. So having that cleaned every couple of years is definitely, I think, important, and something I recommend. So always check on that. You know, 90% of the stuff that I see is all AC related. So if I can get in front of it and say, hey, you know, you should have this thing cleaned and save somebody, you know, a huge headache in the future, you know, it's a win. So, you know.
Are there times where you determine if the unit is either undersized or oversized?
No,
for
I
a
don't get
house?
into any of that. You know, I basically, you know, I'm not an HVAC, I'm not licensed in HVAC. You know, if I have concerns like that, I mean, obviously I've been in construction most of my life, so if I have concerns like that, I'm always going to recommend that they get with a, you know, HVAC contractor to get it figured out. But, you know, other than opening up the unit, you know, looking at and making, you know, I'm really looking for growth or potential signs of the unit leaking or backing up, or, you know, but beyond that, I'm always going to recommend that they get a HVAC contractor out here to take a look at it. So, but I will say that a lot of times units are oversized or undersized. It's like one thing that I find, you know, happens a lot. So it's something that I'm constantly looking at. So.
Yeah. And what are you doing there?
So I'm just looking at the air temperature coming out of.
What would be a good number to see?
If the AC is running, to me, it should be at like 55 degrees. So it's a little warm. you can see, so what'll continue to happen in this bathroom, if you look up here, you see all the dust coming out of this AC duct being blown up here. Now, if you were to let this condition go without cleaning this and addressing these things, you would start getting mold growth. And you could, I bet your money, if you pulled lift samples off of this, that you would 100% be pulling concentrations of mold. I can almost kind of see it. It's hard to tell if it's the texture in the border or if there's growth, but you know, if I had to put money on it, I would say that you would find concentrations of mold there, you know. And that's what's happening here. This leak right here, you know, these two little leak spots, probably not related to that. They're probably either when the roof was leaking or off the duct line for this register right here, you know, not insulating, whatever, condensating, leaking on the ceiling surface, or water leak, but not addressed. And a big proponent of these things is most of these exhaust fans are way undersized. You know, so if you can imagine if you had a family living in here and they were taking lots of showers, this door was closed, the amount of moisture that's being released in here is a lot, and there's just no way for this fan to move that. So all the surfaces stay very wet, and we're just, you know, we're creating the perfect environment. So stuff like this, definitely recommend, you know, upgrading their exhaust fan to help move that a little bit. That's a little higher at 11%, but even that, I'm not concerned with. And you, so something, you know, and this is a good, so this happened a year ago, you know, so if the insulation, all that was severely impacted with wall, what this shows me is these things did get wet at one time, but the conditions were right for it to evaporate quick enough to where you didn't get secondary growth. Because usually what happens is when it gets wet, we don't have conditions where it helps evaporation, and it just sits there wet. And then really, you know, as short as like 72 hours, this thing could kind of turn a corner where you could start seeing mold growth and, you know, further decay and breakdown of the drywall. You know, there'd just be, this looks like, this is a very light stain. This thing got wet and got dry really, really quickly. Just from being here very quickly, you know, I'm not super concerned with what I'm gonna find. Yeah. So, okay. So, I mean, already I'm expecting, because usually when you have stuff like that, it just doesn't get better. And when you do have things that are kind of beyond the point of where it needs to be removed and addressed a little bit more aggressively, sealing it with sealer or paint usually doesn't solve it. But it looks like it kind of has. You know, not the greatest paint job, but it looks like it's sealed. And if, you know, so I'm not anticipating finding anything, okay? So, but we're going to go through, check everything out. Where's the air handler unit? I'm going to take a look at that.
And do you usually follow the same sequence of steps on every job?
For the most part, I mean, everything's different. Every house is different. You know, but I have some fundamentals, you know. One thing I will say is I do very little testing at this point, you know, because of doing such a thorough inspection. Mm-hmm. And I feel like I save people a lot of money, you know, because usually people call and they think they need mold testing. In actuality, they just need somebody to come out and just do what I did, you know, and I do this for free, you know. This is probably an $800 mold inspection for most companies, mm-hmm. So. All right, let's see what we got here.
And what are you looking for here?
Same thing, signs of moisture. I mean, if you look right there, so you can see the surface. I don't know if you can see the surfaces, the inside of the plenum, all that yellow. So that's the inside of the plenum right here. That's attached to the AC unit. So to me, that's disgusting, filthy, needs to be cleaned. So I'm going to recommend that the system gets cleaned. You know, you can only imagine with this much accumulation on these surfaces that, you know, all the surfaces beyond that are going to be wet. You know, there's probably a pretty good likelihood that there's going to be growth on it, and at the minimum needs to be cleaned. So,
And that just is from just not changing your filter often, if that sort of thing happens.
yeah, you know, changing your filter all the time. You know, the house, you know, I can there's a lot of dust for sure. So, obviously, living on a dirt road doesn't help that. You know, now if I can get this thing back together, it'd be a miracle. But, oh, I'll show you this just so we can kind of use it. So typically I would use this to look up inside the coil, but since we can't get this friggin' filter out, I can at least kind of show you what this kind of serves. I mean, you can just see the accumulation of dust on all the surfaces in there. You see like it all floating around too, you know, from me monkeying around. So I'm gonna go ahead and just based on what I'm seeing right there. You know, and again, if you were to take a surface sample from that, the likelihood of that coming back with concentrations of mold is, I would say, very, very high. So I definitely think that this system is at a point where it should be cleaned. All right, so what we're going to do now is just basically take a look up inside the attic.
Check with my husband. Thank you.
No problem.
Sweetie, you got it?
Yeah, so what I'm going to be doing up here is just be looking for areas of, you know, rot or where there's still leaking water, discoloration, growth, and insulation. You know, I'm going to pull back some insulation over there, look at the back side of the drywall, make sure that looks nice and clean. You know, look at the surface conditions. You know, is there any visible growth on any surfaces? I mean, right away I can already see that it's nice and clean in here. It looks very dry. You know, no odors, no real telltale signs of any real issues. So, you know, that's about it. So I'm gonna crawl back there and take a look, but oh, I can see an area right here where they had a leak. Yeah, I mean, it all looks good, man. Little area. Okay. We're giving this thing a clean bill of health. Okay. Everything was related to the leaks, nice and dry.
Even in the attic?
Yeah, everything looks great. So I was able to pull away some insulation around where there was leaks on the drywall. I can see the back of it. There's some staining and stuff, but no growth or anything that looks strange. There's no odors up in the attic. All the trusses, all the wood, very clean, no surface growth. You know, I can see a couple areas and some sheathing that didn't get replaced. That's got like a little rot, but nothing I would be concerned with. Okay, and I mean they're small. I mean it's almost, in their defense, we're talking about like a fraction of a sheet of, so, and not all the way through, just some discoloration and stuff. So I don't think I don't have any concerns with it. So the attic looked good. Everything nice and dry. The air counts are a little high. Not in the areas where I would typically see mold, so I'm not really worried about mold per se. But you know, it's kind of ground zero to have a problem in the future. You know, the more dust, the more, you know, the more dust, essentially, the more dust we have, the more prone we are to getting mold. I mean, they have a very, very close relationship. I opened up I couldn't get the filter out, but I could see the system beyond the filter, and the system definitely needs to be cleaned. And I only recommend about 50% of the time. Usually I don't recommend duct cleanings. I don't think it's a necessity, but I think in your case, it's time to have it done for sure.